Have you ever felt invisible even when you were standing right there? Have you ever worn a smile while your heart knew it was being passed over? This is the story of a woman who learned to live between the shadows of a tent and the quiet of a prayer. A woman named Leah who was overlooked by the man she married but was unmistakably seen by the Lord. In the dry plain of Aram, under a sky of cracked blue and the smell of roasted bread, a family lived by customs older than Mary and by favors that could be traded like grain. Leah moved through that household like a gentle wind nobody noticed, her hands sure in weaving, her voice low in the morning, her eyes learning to welcome the softest kindness as if it were a harvest. The promise I will point to is simple and profound. God honors the hidden devotion and can turn a life that seems unwanted into a channel of blessing for generations. If this brief opening moves you, subscribe to follow more stories that show how the Lord redeems the overlooked. Now come closer and listen to Leah as she walks from being despised by Jacob to being chosen by God. As a child, Leah had a memory of being lighter and quieter than her siblings. She was born into Laban and Adah's household with eyes that watched more than they spoke. The earliest scents she remembered were the wool and lanolin from her mother's loom and the tang of olive oil on a winter morning. She learned to measure herself against her sister Rachel, who had a face like spring and a laugh that made traders pause. From those small years sprang expectations. Mothers whispered about dowries, fathers debated camels and flocks. Sisters practiced coiffures and songs. Leah learned to fold her desires into the hems of her skirts, to braid her hair in ways that did not call attention, to pray in the quiet of the stall where the lambs slept. In youth, she imagined marriage as a harbor, but found herself standing where others chose. Training and hope were part of her formation. She was taught to spin and to bless a house with bread. Yet she was never told which brother would carry her across a threshold. Then came a loss, a sense of being exchanged without consent when arrangements were made that did not consider her heart. Presently, she was a woman who moved through ritual and routine with dignity, but with an undercurrent of ache. Those sensory memories of cedar scent in the house and the scratch of wool on her wrists bound the past to the present and explained why she prayed so quietly. The household included several people who shaped her days. Laban, the shrewd uncle with a quick calculation in his eyes. Rachel, the favored sister whose smile opened doors. Jacob, the man whom many admired for his resolve. And who sought a wife as a prize. Bilhah and Zilpah, the maidservants, whose voices threaded through the tents. Reuben and Simeon, the sons who passed by without seeing Leah fully. And Eliezer, a family friend who sometimes offered the softest courtesy. Each one left fingerprints on her story. The contrast in the family was electric. Where Rachel gathered praise like light gathers on polished metal, Leah collected small mercies and learned to be grateful for a bowl of lentils and a brief word of thanks. The tent smelled of tanned leather, of stale wine, and of the herbs women crushed for medicine. Voices echoed at dusk, and sometimes laughter rolled like distant thunder, while Leah sat by the doorway watching the smoke. One night, the household received a visitor. Jacob arrived, having journeyed long across the bare miles with tired feet and a heart set on Rachel. Preparations were made for vows and for ritual, a veil was arranged and a cup was filled. But the deception came cloaked in celebration. In the courtyard beneath a moon that looked like a coin, someone swapped robes. Someone drew a veil over one sister and set her in the place of another. The scene tasted of bitter iron in Leah's mouth and smelled faintly of myrrh and fear. The wedding night became the first great tension in her life. Dialogue unfolded like a brittle thread. Leah, who are you? Jacob, I am the one who bound my life to your family. Leah, but you sought Rachel. Jacob, I was led by agreement and by promises, but this night I thought you were the one before me. Leah, my name is Leah. Jacob, I have been confused and shamed, yet my heart is tangled in vows and duties. Leah, did they trade me like a sheep? Jacob, the household pressed upon me, and I was not wise. Leah, will you turn away now? I cannot deny what was done, yet I confess I loved another. Leah, then see me now. I will learn to see you. Leah, will you swear by the Lord? By the Lord I will try. Leah, will you give me a place? I will share a tent with you. Leah, will you bless my womb? I will pray with you. In those exchanges, the air was thick with unspoken grief, and the silver of lamplight made the tears visible on Leah's face. The deception tasted of dust, and the clamor of feet in the courtyard still echoed in her chest. After that night, the story of Leah and Jacob became one of daily rejection and small disciplined hope. Domestic life turned into a slow grind of attempts to be seen. Leah woke before dawn to lay out bread and to braid hair for the household. She walked to the well with a clay jar that warmed in her hands, the water reflecting her face like a soft reprimand. Jacob favored Rachel still, and Leah felt the weight of being second. The tent held voices and the small slaps of a child's training, and when Jacob passed through the woven hangings, he often did not look at Leah's hands. She tried many strategies to be noticed. She laughed at the right moment. She added extra embroidered bands to her garments. She offered food more often, and she flattered the household elders. Yet the pattern of preference remained. There were conversations full of longing and modest appeals. Leah, Jacob, would you speak to me? Jacob, I hear you. Leah, I wash your feet. Jacob, thank you. Leah, I sewn your cloak. Jacob, it fits. Leah, do you ever long for the woman you chose? I am torn. Leah, do you pray about us? Sometimes. Leah, will God change what men have done? I hope so. Those lines repeated like threads drawn through a loom. The sensory world of rejection was relentless. The scent of unwashed wool, the roughness of rope used to bind bundles, the metallic clang of utensils that never invited her presence to the table. Leah's inner life shifted slowly. She sought refuge in prayer and in the quiet craft of naming her children, like petitions rolled into syllables. The births came, and each child was a plea, a hinge point, a small repentance of the world against her. The first birth set a pattern. She gave names as prayers and offerings. She named her first son Reuben, meaning, "Behold a son," because she felt someone had seen her at last. The second son she named Simeon, a word carved from the idea that the Lord had heard that she was not loved. The third she called Levi, reflecting her desire for union, and the fourth she named Judah, because she knew somehow that from this child would come praise. There is a turning in Leah's heart at the births that amounts to a spiritual transformation. The naming became her liturgy, and through the babies, her identity altered from someone trying to be chosen by a man to someone who testified that the Lord was tending her. These moments were sensory too. The warm weight of a newborn on her chest, the sweet milk in the long nights, the sound of a child's breath against her collarbone, the soft smell of linen washed in goat's milk, and the quiet song she hummed that tasted of barley and of faith. The pivot toward divine recognition came when Leah acknowledged that God was seeing her in ways Jacob did not. The ancient text says the Lord saw that she was unloved, and in that seeing he acted. This is no mere sentiment, but a theological claim. The God who watches rearranges destinies. Scholars and tradition remind us that Genesis records this, and that later Matthew's genealogy names these children, showing the generational importance of Leah's line. When Leah named Judah and spoke of praise, she was speaking prophetic theology in a domestic tongue. The second great moment of tension arrived when Leah confronted the memory of the wedding deception and the daily marginalization she still faced. In private, she recalled the veil, the lamplight, and the exchange.
She felt the sting of being a wife who had never been first in a man's heart. Leah sat by the loom and the memory rose like steam. Leah, how can I let go? Jacob, I cannot undo what was done. Leah, will the Lord ever make me honored? Jacob, I pray he will. Leah, what is my worth if not chosen? Jacob, your worth is not found only in my eyes, but my hands grew weary. Jacob, I see you now. Leah, do you mean it? Jacob, I will seek justice where I can. In those paragraphs of struggle, her internal monologue wrestled with past injustice and future hope. She remembered the scorn of some and the small kindnesses of others, like Eliezer, who brought bread and counsel, or Zilpah, who whispered sisterly solidarity. The third peak of tension came when Leah realized that being used by the household story did not define her spiritual worth. She experienced an inner courtroom where memory accused and faith defended. She invoked the Lord's promise and found a new posture of worship. In these 2 paragraphs of decision, she chose to praise even when her heart had been wrung and her voice joined the ancient chorus of women who bless in the face of sorrow. The Lord had moved in quiet ways through births and prayer and through the slow accrual of children whose names became a map of redemption. The theological interpretation is clear. God sees the unloved, God hears the unheard, and God uses human pain to forward a promise. Matthew traces lineage and reminds readers that families contain woven threads of joy and sorrow that still lead to the Messiah. Leah's fidelity altered the composition of history, not by spectacle, but by steadfastness in ordinary life. A community invitation comes here. If this narrative has unsettled or comforted you, please write in the comments a brief line beginning with "I also" to share a moment when you felt unseen and how you found consolation. Your testimony can be a balm to another person. Your words will build a community that honors the quiet witness of lives like Leah's. After those years, the epilogue unfolds across time and honors the sequence of consequence. 1 month later, Leah's days were quieter in some ways and busier in others. She had learned to wake to the sound of small feet and to the aroma of porridge and to greet the day with a prayer that tasted of salt and gratitude. Jacob had begun to notice the pattern of blessing around his household, the way his sons clustered and the way elders spoke kindly to Leah. She still bore the memory of being despised. But she found new dignity in tending the tethers of the family and in the soft press of a child's hand. 3 months later, the household was altered more substantially. The older sons began to assume roles in the flocks, and Leah's counsel to the younger women was sought. Rachel and Leah conversed in the evening under a sky pricked with stars, and for the first time in years, there was a measure of mutual respect between them. Gifts were exchanged like apologies of wool and oil. Leah had become a woman whose devotion could not be dismissed, and the Lord's favor manifested in the cohesion of the household. 6 months later, the legacy was more visible. The sons of Leah stood among the tribes as leaders, and their names were recited in genealogies. Elders spoke of how a woman once overlooked now cast an influence that crossed tenths and generations. Her life was still marked by hardship, but also by honor. The Lord who sees had moved from private consolation to public consequence, and the lineage that came through Leah would be woven into the greater story of redemption. To reflect the theological truth, the story shows that human preference does not thwart divine purpose. God honorably redeems what the world casts off. In closing, remember Leah's journey from being despised by Jacob to being chosen by God. She moved from invisible pains to a worshipful heart that praised the Lord and altered history. If today you carry a weight of neglect, take heart. The Lord sees you and may turn your sorrow into a seed of blessing. Share this video with someone who needs to know they are seen, and subscribe for more stories that lift the faithful and the forgotten. The life of Leah teaches that no devotion is wasted, and that the Lord can honor the lowly in ways that echo through generations.